Hey everyone, Nick Engvall here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about some of the people that make the sneaker history community and this podcast possible. It's more important than ever to think about who you give your money to when you're buying clothing to go with your kicks. Our friends at Guilty Goods started their brand with a goal of giving back, especially to the communities that make sneaker culture possible. With every purchase from Guilty Goods, at least 10% of the proceeds are donated to organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, the Susan G. Komen Foundation, the Movement for Black Lives, and many more. You can save 30% on your order by using the code HISTORY at guiltygoods.us. Again, that's history at guiltygoods.us for 30% off, and you can feel good about your purchase knowing you're supporting a meaningful cause. Sneakers are all about presentation, and if you're like me, displaying your kicks at home or in the office is just as important as when they're on your feet. Sneaker Throne makes sneaker display cases featuring customizable LED lights, drop-side cases to showcase the entire side of the shoe, not just the heel or the toe, the whole shoe. They've also got display cases for trading card collectors and hat collectors. To me, it's the perfect way to display your collection. You can save at least 10% on your Sneaker Throne order by using the code HISTORY at sneakerthrone.com. That's history at sneakerthrone.com. If you're a Patreon supporter or a member of our Discord community, you already know about Kicks with V hot sauce and his small batch, locally sourced hot sauce. V has been one of the biggest supporters of sneaker history and the podcast since the early days. He's currently the defending champion in our community trivia nights competition. Kicks with V hot sauce has been a huge hit with the community. You can save 10% on your order by using the code SneakerHistory10 at kickswithvhots.com. That's SneakerHistory10 at kickswithvhots.com. Now, you're probably here because you like sneakers, and if you join the Discord, you know our community is about so much more than that. Whether it's the marathon-like community calls, trivia night debates, the in-person meetups, or just sharing our favorite experiences, we found that although we have such different backgrounds, we all have some unexpected shared passions. Not only does the entire community look out for each other when it comes to releases, we're like a support group for life in general. You can join the Discord community for free by heading to the show notes of this episode. After you're done listening to this episode, tell someone you like their kicks today. You never know how far a simple compliment can take you, and we all know how good it feels to have someone show their appreciation. Now let's get into today's episode.
Jordan trying to shake off Starks. Oh, what a LeBron James with no regard for human life. Final seconds. Bryant for the win. Iverson against Gill, the crowd on its feet. Allen for the win.
Welcome to the Sneaker History Podcast.
What up, what up? Welcome back to the Sneaker History Podcast. My name's Nick Engvall. I'm with my guys Mike and Rohit to talk about some kicks. We got some great feedback from the last episode. We talked about some of our most, let's say, game-changing sneakers in our younger days. And we want to get into a little bit deeper of a dive into that story maybe, and kind of expand in a way. But before we get into that, because we touched on some sensitive topics, I'm going to let Rohit give a little PSA for the listeners and sponsors / potential sponsors. Take it away, Rohit.
Thank you, Nicholas. I would first like to preface this statement by saying the opinions expressed by me are only that of myself and not that of the corporate entity of the Nick Engvall Empire, the Sneaker History Podcast, the Exhaust Notes Podcast, Crown and Stitch, Stitch and Crown, and God knows how many other secret podcasts Nick has, because I'm convinced at this point he's got one for every day. But yes, as my illustrious co-host alluded to, we went after some people last episode, and not just any people, one person in particular, arguably the deadbeat dad of the fast food industry, and that's one Papa Murphy's. And like a deadbeat dad, Papa Murphy's only does half the job. But because we are always trying to find balance in this crazy thing we called life, and as a Libra, I need to be fair and balanced, we decided today we would skew to the other end. And this is going to be anywhere from a 5 to 15 minute love letter to the flagship Mexican restaurant in America. Not Taco Time, not Fiesta Del Mar, not Chipotle, not Qdoba. I'm, of course, talking about Taco Bell, a.k.a. T-Bell, a.k.a. tuberculosis. No, that's not it either. I've already gone off script.
Wrong place.
But the reason we're talking about this is, as is with all of our great episodes, some of the best ideas happen to us during our pregame meeting, which is 5 minutes before we go live. And there's somebody in this call. We're not going to mention his name. We'll just point him out as the gentleman in the middle taking a big swig of something.
I don't know who
his name rhymes
about.
with Mike. Yep. No idea. And we had to put young, let's call him Bike, on game. And by a game, we mean there is now a significant and very special restaurant in the heart of Las Vegas. And that is called the Taco Bell La Cantina. And that's Spanish for the championship. That's not actually Spanish for the championship, but it feels like you've won so many championships. Because when you go in there, it is 2 stories. It has a VIP lounge, whatever the hell that is. Because that's a sentence I don't associate with Taco Bell. Unless you're talking about their bathrooms. And really, that's half the allure of going to a Taco Bell is the bathrooms are always questionable, but it adds a certain spice to the story that you're telling your friends.
I like the double entendre there, the spice, because, yeah, you go in the bathroom, it's going to be rough probably.
Look, why spend $35 on a juice cleanse that's like almond milk and turmeric when you can just get a Baja Blast and a potato cheesy Fiesta Crunch, and you're going to get the same result. You're going to lose the same weight, but I digress.
Less time, you're going to do it.
Less time. What can Brown do for you? In this case, clean out your bowels. Other thing, I'm not much of a drinker. Really, I don't drink at all. But the thing that I see when I talk to my buddies, my friends, my family, my peer group, my adversaries, my acquaintances, is the fact that there's no other location that I can think of that mixes alcohol with Taco Bell classics. And all I told Mike, oh, I'm sorry, Bike, or you know what? It is Mike.
It's me.
Mike Guillory.
It is what it is.
Yeah,
This guy.
I mentioned the word Baja Blast Margarita, and this man went on Expedia and tried to book a trip right then and there.
You think I'm joking?
No, I'm not joking. I'm like, as is commonplace in a lot of other podcasts, explain yourself.
I mean, first of all, have you had a Baja Blast Mountain Dew? I'm not a big soda drinker, but when I do, it's a Baja Blast Mountain Dew.
It's the Gatorade Frost of sodas. Where like I don't maintain Gatorade Frost is so much better than every other Gatorade there is. It's because it's the most artificial. Like they've given up on this whole notion of you have to have fruit flavoring.
Yeah.
Like what the hell's a Riptide Rush? What the hell's Glacier Frost?
From the middle of Pacific, they grab the water, boom.
Yeah, because you find that purple only in the deepest of springs in the Colorado mountain ranges.
I mean, look, man. First of all, that is the most exciting thing I've heard today. And I mean, come on. Nick, don't let Nick fool you. He's laughing, but he is in so deep with Mexican pizzas like myself that I'm booking him a ticket too, because he'll join me in our gorging ourselves on Mexican pizzas and Baja Blast margaritas. And our significant others will probably have to drag us out of there because $20 can probably do so much damage in that place. Think about it. The dollar menu at Taco Bell or the $5 box with a $5 Baja Blast margarita. I'm hurting myself. That bathroom, they're going to have to call someone afterwards.
You've heard the concepts of white room? That's the brown room. It's just everywhere. I don't know why it's always poop with me, but Nick, please save us.
I don't know what to say. I mean, if Mike goes, I'm going, you know.
By the way, when you say going, does that mean literally going?
I mean, one step at a time, right? Like, yeah, you've got to start with the getting there. Then you have to go, right? Like, it's not really a choice afterwards, but you know,
there's no options once you eat it.
But I mean, I agree. Mexican pizza, and I mean, I'm not like the craziest Baja Blast fan. I think it's great, but I don't drink soda outside of Taco Bell. So when I do, I'm always trying to go for Dr. Pepper because that's the soda that I miss drinking.
That's fair.
But
okay, all right.
But I also think that if they have alcohol and if you could do mixed drinks, my friends and I back in the day when we were a little more liberal with our alcohol, made up a drink called the Teeter Totter, which is actually Crown Royal and Dr. Pepper. Cherries if you want. For me, I'm always a maraschino cherry fan. I know they're not good for me. I know that they're basically fake and poisonous and all those things.
We're talking Taco Bell. We're already past that point of not good for you.
You get me that combination of those three things in a beverage and a Mexican pizza or 2 or 3 or 4 Mexican pizzas, and I might propose to you on the spot. I don't know. Like, I mean, I can't think of a better like what else like just exemplifies commitment in my life than that.
I'll tell you what. I'm not very much a religious man. I'm not sure what's up there, but I do believe something and someone is up there, and he or she takes care of all of us, because that's why Taco Bell was introduced in my life. And then, like all the good gods, he or she also punishes us when we indulge too much in a good thing.
Gluttony,
Like
we can't have that, man.
if we ever remade Seven, instead of a serial killer feeding me spaghetti until I explode, I would hope that it would be the chicken quesadilla or the Mexican pizza, because this is the other thing we are giving you, listener, as a life hack. Is not only is the Mexican pizza probably the crown jewel in the Taco Bell kingdom, it is the one item that unites non-vegetarians and vegetarians. And you may wonder, why is that? Because let me tell you, as somebody that's married to a vegetarian that believes in the exuberance and the healing powers of the Mexican pizza, what is the most questionable thing about Taco Bell to the naysayers and the non-believers? Obviously not any of us on this panel tonight, but are the heretics that we may find ourselves aligned with in life.
Oh, we
It's
know
the
the risk.
questionable
It's the meat. We know the risk. We take it.
Ironically, it's not Arby's that's about the meat. It's about Taco Bell and the meats. And our our vegetarian brethren and sisterin have decided, let's take this poison chalice of a ingredient out of the equation. So they eat it vegetarian. They have a much longer life. They're not eating as much processed food as us heathens in the meat are, but we're okay, because that's what Taco Bell, like all great things, does. It divides us only to show how united we can be when things are dire. And right now things are dire because Mike has not gone to La Cantina. I can't even say it right now. This is the Guan Yu Zhou of fast food for me. But if you are in the greater Las Vegas area, hell, if you're in the continental 48, maybe even the 50, let's get Puerto Rico some love right now because they desperately need it. Find yourself to the nearest Taco Bell, and by any means necessary, get a Mexican pizza. Tell them Nick Engvall sent you. As they get concerned and confused about what that means,
Like who?
take a swig of Baja Blast. And that's all I have to say on this topic. Guys, any final thoughts?
I mean,
My father-in-law lives there, so if you hear this, I'm on the way.
so I know there's Cantina locations other places. So if you know of some,
Wait, what?
There's one in Chicago for sure.
Chicago, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
there's one in Chicago for sure. And I think there's probably some in Southern California somewhere, but I'm not 100% sure on those. But if
I
you
will
know of
find out.
them,
You guys
you
keep
should
going.
definitely leave us a comment in the Discord or on social media channels at Sneaker History about that and let us know what your nearest locale is. The last thing I will say about this, kind of on the vegetarian tip, because I ebb and flow out of vegetarianism pretty regularly when Mexican pizza is not on the menu. Taco Bell, if you ever hear this, just make some Impossible meat. It's probably the same thing, to be honest. So let's just get it over with. Impossible meat on the Taco Bell menu, Impossible meat Mexican pizza. I'd probably eat more. I don't know if I can eat there. I don't know if it's physically possible to eat at Taco Bell more than I do right now. So I will talk about you on the podcast more frequently if you can do that for me. That's all. Thank you for listening to our 10-minute rant about this. It's been an honor to indulge ourselves amongst your presence as listeners and viewers. Let's talk about some sneakers.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Now I'm just hungry. Great.
By the way, Mike, there is a Taco Bell cantina in Texas.
Is it in Houston,
Austin.
Texas?
It's in Austin, Texas, unfortunately.
So far away.
It is.
I mean, you could always go for Formula One weekend when the rest of the Exhaust Notes crew will be there, right? Wink, wink. Exhaust Notes
Are
FM.
you going next month? Is this a thing?
Not this year. Not this year. I'm not going.
Oh,
this
I
year.
was like, I guess I need to show up.
Plenty of guys in the Discord will definitely be there, though. But
Yeah.
anyway, I want to talk about a shoe that changed your opinion once you got it in hand or got it on foot. Because I started thinking about this after we talked about recent episode about, the shoe that kind of like really significantly changed our opinion or our emotional connection to sneakers. And there's a handful that like came to mind when I first started thinking about it, but I think there's probably one more recent within the last 10 years that really was like kind of a poignant one for me. So I'm going to let one of you guys start us off, and then I'll get into my kind of I don't know what the term would be, but it's basically when you see a shoe and you're like, that's all right. And then you see it in hand or put it on foot and you're like, whoa, this is not what I was expecting. And you basically instantly start going looking for other colorways.
You there?
Oh. Can you hear us, Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. You just like you froze and it was just you said in hand. That's all the last one we heard. All right. So
Yep.
I have to go with a recent one for me. New Balance 2002R. Love the shoe. I just never understood the protection pack or Refined Future to what it should be called. I was like, it's just the same thing and some like jagged edges on it. I got one in hand and I was like, oh, okay, I understand.
Is that where the party's at?
I understand that's where the party's at this point. I was like, I was being that guy like, this is stupid. Then I was like, all right, let me try it. And like, I understand why you fools out here are paying this much money. I won't do that because I got these for retail, but I understand because it just makes the shoe look so much better with just kind of just the extra touches. And I don't justify $500 for a New Balance sneaker, but I can see why people are a bit excited about it as a really cool look. And of course the shoe is just comfortable as all get out. So I get it. So that's one of mine that I had.
What is retail on that shoe anyway?
Retail for this one is, I want to say $150 for the Refined Future. Typically, I think normal 2002Rs are like $130.
Yeah. It's a good shoe. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Not mad at it.
No, I think for me, it's not necessarily a shoe per se, but more a signature line. And part of this is the pettiness that I have as a human being associated with the inspiration behind the signature line. And of course, I'm talking about the Kobe line. And I think so much of last episode was predicated on where we are in our lives when we fell in love with sneakers or got bit by the sneaker bug. And when you get bit by the sneaker bug, so much of your thought process around sneakers is your financial situation. So I think all of our co-hosts, including myself, all had this moment of when we would buy sneakers, that was the only thing we wore for 6 months or a year. So then when you get placed in the industry and you have that disposable income that inevitably goes towards sneakers, you can be a little bit more selective, and that kind of opens your eyes around, okay, yeah, I like this sneaker for its aesthetic, or I like this sneaker for its performance if you're playing a particular sport. And for me, I think I've waxed poetic on countless episodes about the Airjet Flight Max, and that was probably the definitive low-top basketball shoe before Kobe's 4. And that was one of those things where I fell in love with that shoe. I am in that cult. I will always speak highly of that shoe. And I always thought that any low-cut basketball shoe was pale in comparison to that Airjet Flight Max. I see the Kobe in hand. I'm like, okay, great, low cut. This is going to be eh. But then you play in it. And you're like, okay, as much as I hate the guy right now behind this shoe, this is a great shoe. This truly allows me to play up to whatever my pedestrian level is as a basketball player. And that's the secret of a great basketball shoe. It causes you to overachieve in a way that you don't think possible until you wear the shoe and you do assists, points, rebounds in said shoe. So for now, the Kobe Bryant line, and then a pinnacle point in that line was the 8, because then that was, in my mind, the first shoe that was equally aesthetically pleasing as it was performance-based. And so you had colorways like the Mamba Kuro, which took into account Kobe's love of soccer, but then also kind of applied the chocolate and the peanut butter methodology we always talk about, where you're combining two things that on the surface don't have a connection, but when they do have that connection and when it is discovered by the masses, oh, there's this feeling of how did we ignore this? How did we live our life without making that? So I think for me, the Kobe line right now would be that.
Yeah, that's a good call.
It is.
I kind of say that's definitely one of those moments for me too. A little bit earlier on in the line, but the Kobe 4, it was like, I mean, that was obviously like kind of a game changing shoe because it shifted the perception of like what you could play in, right? Like,
yeah.
In hindsight, you know, it wasn't a low cut shoe the way the line evolved to low cut shoes. But when the 4 came out, it was kind of like, wait, a pro basketball player at Kobe's level playing in a shoe that is, you know, a mid at best, you know. And I know that like when you see it in hindsight and everybody does their comparison videos of like, oh, well, it's almost the same size as the Jordan 3 or whatever, but like it didn't feel like that. It felt like, what the hell is Kobe doing wearing this? And I absolutely love that shoe. I mean, it's also like the heart of the rivalry between between Kobe and or the Lakers and the Kings and all of that. So it's hard for me to like acknowledge that as a fan, but that shoe is a game changer.
I'm the same way, right? Like there's this concept of the critically acclaimed teams, which are those teams that have a special spot in your heart, but they've never won a title. So all we can do in terms of remembering them is waxing poetic on our respective podcasts. Kobe Bryant and Shaq and Robert Horry and Derek Fisher have put a lot of teams in that critically acclaimed column when in actuality they should have been champions.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Robert Horry specifically, right? Like he just took our hearts out, threw them on the ground, stomped on them. Yeah.
But Mike, the greatest ability is availability. Sorry, I butchered that. Unlike Robert Horry, who would have probably said it flawlessly and in French. So there you go.
I'm in the same boat. It was like that T-Mac era of my Rockets, and he just couldn't get past Kobe. So I understand, and I remember seeing the Kobe 4 the first time when I was in college. I think it was my first year of college at the rec center where we played ball. I saw someone wearing them. I'm like, it was like the white and gold pair. I'm like, oh my God, like these are literally amazing. But I don't know how I feel about these shoes because Kobe is literally wrecking my team single-handedly. But you know what? I let that hate go. And the next year when the Kobe 5 came out, best believe I jumped on the train immediately.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the other, kind of along that line of the journey, right? We talked about, a lot of those memories for us in the previous episode were that like turning point, 15, 16, 17, where you're getting to the point where you're making your own decisions around sneakers. You're maybe buying your first pair and you're starting to make some money to like be able to buy more pairs, whatever that looks like. I think from a career trajectory for me. Okay, time out. Did you know that we have an entire network of podcasts? That's right. It's called the Retrospect Podcast Network, and it includes a number of shows that you might like if you're enjoying this one. First up is for the F1 fans. Exhaust Notes is a Formula One podcast that's the perfect balance for the new fans joining the sport and the tried and true diehard F1 fans who've been there all along. New episodes of Exhaust Notes drop every Tuesday on all of your favorite podcast platforms and at exhaustnotes.fm. We've also got a show for the fitted hat collectors out there called Crown and Stitch. As a baseball fan, I've been obsessed with hats for as long as I can remember, and the number of people collecting now has gone through the roof. It reminds me of sneakers back in the day, and I absolutely love seeing creativity of the new releases. Every Wednesday, we drop a new episode of Crown and Stitch on all of your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube at youtube.com/crownandstitch. If you follow me personally on social platforms at Nick Engvall, you probably already know I first dipped my toes in the podcast game back in 2015 with a show called Outside the Box. Originally hosted by my friends Brandon Edler and Jacques Slade, it eventually evolved into a show with Tiffany Beers, Jacques Slade, and myself, and then into an interview series with some amazingly creative guests. While the show has gone through a lot of changes throughout the years and is currently on hiatus, a lot of people have been enjoying past episodes recently, and I'm excited to say I have new episodes in the works for the new year. We'll be adding new podcasts to the Retrospect Network in the coming months as well. In fact, if you'd like to advertise on any of the shows, be a guest on any of the shows, or even talk to us about getting your own podcast started, reach out to us at podcast@sneakerhistory.com and find out more about the podcast network at retrospectpodcast.com. In whatever it was, 2012, 2013, I was at Finish Line. And before that, I had written for Soul Collector. I'd written for Nice Kicks. I had done a bunch of contract work for East Bay. I'd done some work for East Bay through my Soul Collector job. But I really hadn't been fully in the corporate world of what the footwear industry is. And so when I got to Finish Line, I really learned a lot from that experience because you don't necessarily realize all the nuances, all the ins and outs, all the back and forth that has to happen for a company for a manufacturer like Nike or Adidas or Converse or somebody to work with a retailer like Finish Line. Because on one hand, you have the brand and they tell an aspirational story, right? Nike is the best at this. They're absolutely the best at this. Yeah. And whether that's, Nike or Wieden and Kennedy or any of their other partners, they always find a way to get the best story out, the most aspirational and inspirational, if we're being completely honest. But like, just the statement of everyone is an athlete and that mentality, it's to your point, Rohit, it's like it wraps us all in, right? Whether we're just putting on a pair of shoes to play casually, we feel like that is a part of us becoming better at what we do, whatever that is we do. And all the brands do this in some way or another, right? And sometimes it's wrapped into a performance or a technology advancement. Sometimes it's just the statement and it gets lovingly butchered by Kevin Garnett. Impossible is nothing. Everything's impossible. I don't know what the statement is at this point. It's been so long, but the shoes that changed my perspective on Adidas, I couldn't grab the first one, but it's the Energy Boost was the very first Energy Boost. And then of course the Ultra Boost. So like,
Nice.
This is like my fourth or fifth pair of this colorway. Obviously my favorite, purple being a King's color. I'm wearing it pretty regularly anyway. But the craziest part about that shoe and when it came out, not this shoe, but the Energy Boost, the first Energy Boost was like the story wasn't necessarily heavily about Boost yet. It was Boost, but it was like the Tech Fit upper, right? Like it was essentially like it was kind of like a fleece, but like seam welded with like this, kind of plasticky.
Yeah.
Everybody does seam welding it nowadays with synthetics, but like then it was really interesting to me visually and like just trying to understand what that shoe was. But then when I got the shoe and wore the shoe for the first time, it was like, okay, this styrofoam looking stuff that I think is kind of weird looking is like at that point, the aesthetic no longer mattered. I was like, this shoe is way more comfortable than anything else I'm putting on. The upper was sort of sock like at that time, not full like Ultra Boost levels, but you still had the separation between the upper and the tongue on that shoe. But the cushioning on it was just so impressive to me. Like part of that played into like where I was life-wise. I was running a lot, so I ran in that shoe. I was living in Boulder, working at Finish Line, and I was literally like walking, half mile to work every day. I never drove my car. So it was like one of those things where like I would wear those, and even in the snow, I would wear something like that. And I would have like a pair of shoes at my desk that I could change and wear around the office. So I could wear some other heat in the office. Right. But like that shoe was like such a crazy, like it was a moment where I don't know if I have any friends that are still working at Finish Line or that listen to this, but like it was a moment where I think we missed the opportunity as Finish Line to tell our story with that shoe, but also Adidas missed their opportunity to tell that story too. Thankfully for Adidas, Kanye came along, wore the 2M, the second.
It was a pure boost he wore, right?
It was an Energy Boost. The first, it's like the Energy Boost 2 Energy Boost SM or 2M or something like that. I can't remember the technical name of it, but yeah, it was basically like a running shoe that was a performance running shoe that was all white, and that shoe sold out instantly everywhere. And then it turned into the Ultra Boost. It turned into him wearing the Ultra Boost. But like, I don't want to take away from the kind of the credit that Kanye does deserve, because like he's gone a long ways from where I've lost my interest as a fan. But the turning point for Adidas, in my opinion, could not have happened without Boost happening at that moment, because they had the design aspects of this running in parallel as Boost was coming out, right? So you had the ZX Flux, you had the tubular returning in its new form. You had, Nick Galway, who has basically designed, realistically, he's the one that inspired Kanye to come to Adidas and make all these shoes with Adidas. But like that era right there was such a sweet spot. And I just happened to be at Finish Line, being able to be a part of these launches for this stuff on a massive scale. Finish Line's a North American company, but like, we were working with, like players in the league to like connect the dots for us, because it was like well, we can't necessarily talk about basketball shoes that we don't have, but if we can get, 5 minutes with Jeremy Lin or 5 minutes with, Patrick Beverly, or, we did some stuff with Joakim Noah. Like, there's just so many opportunities for us to like connect the dots in a way that's like, hey, these guys will wear this stuff off the court as well because it's comfortable. Yeah. But like Boost was like such a game changer in that regard that, to me, like, I have to mention it in this conversation because it just changed everything about the competitive landscape of sneakers as well. Right. It gave Adidas like the opportunity to compete with Nike at the top of at the top levels of sneakers in a way that 100%. We haven't seen since, right? Like Virgil came back and like shifted it again. And it's like, we haven't really heard much from Adidas. We haven't really heard, I mean, don't get me wrong. All these brands make amazing stuff. Like, but like, I'm talking like who owns the conversation across the board when the people that don't care about sneakers are listening. And it's been Nike for the last, 4 or 5 years. And Adidas had that really crazy window there that was just like the perfect storm of design, aesthetic, Kanye being a part of it, and technology that was like, most importantly, technology that was usable and wearable by the average consumer. Because that's one of the things Robbie and I talked about recently is like, I love all that next 5% vapor stuff. Like, it's like, that stuff is amazing to me, but it's also so far above the heads of 90% of the world that like, it doesn't really matter until we bring it down to like the $150 price point. Right. So
$400 ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah, exactly. But
now I was going to ask you, Nick, do you think what caused the Yeezy to jump over the Jumpman was the Boost? Because it's one of those things that I was in Nike for a decade, as some of the listeners of the pod may know. And there are very few moments in time that I can remember that the random PLM at Nike was ever going to admit something bothered them, let alone out and out saying that one is giving me nightmares. And I will say this, the Boost inspired a lot of different nightmares of people within the industry, especially those that are based on the Beaverton side of Portland, let's just say. And it was one of those things where I didn't buy it necessarily because I think I was so deep in the forest that I couldn't see the trees. But when you remove yourself from that, that is probably the highest compliment you can pay a shoe, is like, it's so comfortable. I don't care what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, and then it starts to grow on you at that point too. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. And like, maybe someday we'll get into the nuances of, the crosstown rivalry in Portland. Cause the across the river statement I've heard 100, 200 times, 300 times in my life of like, we don't really talk about those people across the river. And it's just such a wild thing to me. Right. No, but that's how competitive it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's the across the river rivalry. There's the inside the berm rivalry. Yep. That if you are paying attention, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together and figure out what are the warring factions. But I will say this: it's an industry where ego cannot let you admit any mistakes. Yeah. So it speaks volumes when you even give that little nugget, that morsel of a compliment to the other guy, saying, holy shit, we have to kind of up our game now. And to your point, Nick, people are going to gravitate towards the Kanye of it all because he is that big shiny star that it's an easy narrative to latch onto. But Adidas tech was a little bit better than Nike tech in that moment, whether anybody wants to admit it or not.
I 100% agree. So I actually have a theory on this that I'm gonna let Mike speak because I feel like I've been cutting him off. But I have a theory on this I think Nike made a singular mistake that they have never made before in that moment that actually left that opportunity open. But go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm just gonna say that even to this day, the Ultra Boost is one of those few shoes that I will continue to buy over and over. And I'm in a dilemma now of where I'm looking at 2 shoes I like. One of them being the Jordan. One of them, I can actually get my hands on that chalk/cream Ultra Boost that retroed again this year. I had no idea. And I'm leaning towards Ultra Boost because that's one of those shoes that will always have a special place for me because it was different. And I was part of when I say part of that, I watched the growth of, nobody's messing with Adidas. That's kind of how the overarching sneakerhead thing was to, boom, this blew up. I still have a pair of original 1.0s in my closet, the black and with the white boost. It's just, I don't say this word often, but it's one of the perfect shoes out there. Like, there's nothing wrong with that shoe. And I really think that with everything going on with Kanye and Adidas, if Adidas was smart, I would say if we're going to get rid of the 350 eventually, I say let's start transitioning Ultra Boost back and try to find a way to make it that casual shoe again, because they made it more performance, because they had the 350 already. So let's make it more performance driven. If they not scale back, but kind of revert back to that casual wear, I think they could maybe not catch lightning in a bottle again, but I think they can put the Ultra Boost in a competitive place in the sense of the sneakerhead, because everyday people buy the Ultra Boost. Like, this basically, they walk into the Academy, walk into Dick's, they grab an Ultra Boost. That's still a high selling shoe. But if you want to get it back to that quote unquote hype, just start transitioning it back. And again, it's a perfect shoe.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's there's an inherent like pendulum that swings in the sneaker world, right? It goes from, I'm willing to wear this shoe that's maybe a little bit bulky or a little bit of a dated retro style, or maybe it's a new modern style, but it's just over the top and like big. And the Ultra Boost was the opposite of that, right? It was not us saying, it's not Nike saying we're going to make the Nike Free series and everybody's a runner and you're going to run in a barefoot inspired sneaker. It was like, no, this is just going to feel like a sock and it's going to have some crazy cushioning on it. And that in itself was enough to catch the pendulum at the right moment, in my opinion. And I think that, you can layer on the Kanye effect and look, I think the Ultra Boost would have been incredibly popular even if Kanye never wore it, because to the average person, it was pretty comfortable. Now, it's not like a shoe that you can wear, like I can wear a pair of, let's say, Jordan 1s or Dunks or Forums or New Balance 550s in the garage, working on the car, not have to worry about anything falling on my feet, getting beat up or something. With the Ultra Boost, it's a little bit different, right? Because it's a knit upper. It really is like, okay, this is a casual shoe. Or if you want to run it, I mean, I ran in it for a long time when it first came out. I think there's better options now. But like, I think the one thing that I always go back to about that era, right? So the Roshi came out 2012. The tubular came out. Roshi came out. I want to say like June of 2012, mid-year, spring, summerish. The tubular came out like basically 8 to 9 months later, early spring 2013. Very, very similar in terms of like style, right? There was no backstory to the Roshi. There was no legacy story. There was no retro product. There was no product that inspired it. There was with the tubular. So like Adidas didn't really lean into that too much because the tubular system originally was not a thing that like people caught on to or knew about, right? You had to be kind of really into the sneaker world and probably more importantly into like technology of running shoes to care about tubular, 25 years ago. But the thing that Nike always does that is incredible is stuff we've already mentioned, right? The Free series, 5.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 7.0, the double sack zoom in the, next percent fly, whatever it is, just repeatedly Air Max, everything about what Nike has done incredibly well has connected you to a future purchase. And I don't think people realize how well they do this, because like they introduce Air Max as a overarching storyline, not even just a technology. They introduce that. And now all of a sudden you are going to care about whatever else comes out from any of the brands at Nike. They never did that with the Roshi. The Roshi had a very unique outsole. It was very simplistic and minimal, but it was comfortable. Yeah. The upper, like super simple, nothing crazy. And like everybody was looking for something that was inexpensive and comfortable. But Nike didn't latch on to telling the story of what the technology was or what the cushioning was or what could I take from the Roshi and get in the next shoe. Even the second Roshi, it just didn't happen. There was no connection to it. And I think that is the missing piece, that they left like the slightest window of opportunity for Adidas to take that market share in that moment. Because if Nike would have, let's say the Roshe had, I don't know, pick a name, right? Moon crystal cushioning. Every shoe from that point on, because Nike's so good at it, you would be looking like, okay, which is the next moon crystal cushioning? I got to see what they're going to do with this.
Yeah.
It lives so well on its own. And part of that is because it was so inexpensive. They didn't need to tell the story. Like the people that are buying a Roshe at Kohl's didn't care if it was, they cared because they bought it for $60 or $70. They didn't care about the Zen-like features of the shoe,
But put like React in the sole would have been different. Like call it React. Like
right.
we had
They done that, had they done some sort of like you would have had this continuation. And not to say that Nike didn't capitalize on the Roshe, right? Because the Roshe was a solid. I mean, I feel like they had a 2 or 3 year run of just the first pair. And, but like, unlike what Nike always does, they didn't attach whatever their signature moment was, right? That could be Flyknit, that could be cushioning, that could be Zoom cushioning,
Nick,
or Zoom insoles,
do you
whatever.
think that's because it goes against the actual aesthetic of the shoe? Like you said it yourself, it's a very minimalist Zen shoe. And when I hear those terms, I don't necessarily think of a wealth of materials or the newest technology. I agree with you. I agree with every point you're making. If they had put any sort of branding on any sort of that property of that shoe, you would have people that are not even sneakerheads waxing poetic about, the moon crystals really give you the best toe separation. So that way, when you get a pedicure, you don't have as much dead skin in between your toes. Like whatever that story is. And it's one of those things where I think the Roshe, like that's a shoe that deserves its own 30 for 30, lack of a better term, because of its humble beginnings, how it got to where it got, and then the inevitable sequel that felt so anti-Roshe because it just felt like a cash grab more than anything. And I think to your point, if they had done a better job of telling the story with the Roshe 1, they could have done a better job telling the story with the Roshe 2, and the shoe wouldn't have died off. But there's also some other off the field curricular activities in my mind that led to that downfall of that shoe, but that's for the super exclusive Patreon episode that only 4 of us are ever going to hear.
Well, dude, I would love, so if they decide to bring back the Roshe, which they won't do because it would have to take some kind of weird, we're bringing back a Travis Scott Roshe. That would kind of be their way of justifying to bring it back.
Yep.
But if they were to bring it back and all right, cool, let's do what Nick's saying. Let's put something behind it so that way the tech heads will be a part of it. The hype beast will be a part of it. Let's change it the whole outsole. Make it this like same design. Bring back the Roshe 1 in the Protro setting, but change the whole thing to Zoom X cushioning. You don't know how many shoes I would buy if they would change it to full Zoom X outsole cushioning. God knows it won't last super long, but the story of the cushioning, the comfortability of the shoe, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you would capture different markets. You have to probably charge $150 for it now, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Mike, look at it this way. This thing right here is the modern day Roshe.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story that they could easily tell and say, we came up with this shoe to go after the people with disabilities that can't tie their shoe.
Yep.
And it's got a very similar aesthetic to the Roshe. It's got a very similar aesthetic to the Sock Dart. And I'm not sure that wasn't done purposely. Everything Nike does has a meaning behind it. It's just how quickly can we as the public decode it, and how quickly can they apply it to the next iteration of whatever shoe it is. Mm-hmm. I really hope that this signals a return to that type of aesthetic where it's less is more.
Yeah. Well, hold on, let me grab some because for what we're talking about, I think it's probably good to see this. Hold on, y'all keep going. I want to pull up this old shoe real fast.
Nick, you said this is going to be a 30-minute episode. I think we're about to hit hour 2 now.
Well, it's interesting because I agree with you on it would have lost its zen without, or with some sort of crazy branding. But I think that's what's interesting to me is like Air, for instance, right now, Air at pre-Vapor Max, right? Where we have just a full, I know it's not 360, but like the Air Max 2013 to 17 or whatever, right? Essentially the same like storyline, but filled with air. You know, like if you were to just say, okay, well, this is Roshi foam, that's all it would have taken for the second one to work. That could have translated into even more sales of, you know, any of the slip-on stuff, right? Like it could have, maybe that just became the slip-on stuff. What's interesting too, as I'm saying that, is Adidas tried to do that. They tried to capitalize on the momentum of that like casual look with their cloud foam stuff. And those shoes are crazy comfortable, but they absolutely did not go anywhere. And they had a whole different, whole lineup of cloud foam cushioned shoes, but they just didn't. The original cloud foam, I think they were like, let's make another Roshi competitor 4 years later. And the Roshi did retro, right? Like I think the Roshi, they called it the Roshi 1, right? In like 2015 or 2016.
For like a second, it was like a flash in the pan kind of deal. Like it didn't last long.
Yep.
Like whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it's just nuts. So I brought this one out because we were talking about it, looking at a lot of those shoes we're talking about, those very like simplistic runners. This is original Ultra Boost from 2015. Was 7 years now, almost 8 years. This shoe, like, it actually held up. You get a lot of runners and simplistic, minimalistic shoes, they start falling apart. So, I just don't, I mean, I understand everything is a trend, it'll come back around, but Adidas did something so good where I guess the most irritating thing about it is that the Boost stains and it's really hard to clean it because of like all the crevices. But even if the shoe is quote unquote bottomed out, it's not like an air bubble where I'm like squeaking around. You can tell that I have a flat tire. I could still wear this shoe and be extremely comfortable. I may have a little bit more ground feel, but they market this shoe so well that it sucks that it kind of hinged on Kanye a bit. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of goes back to Nick's point. You market something, the word Boost is synonymous with all sneakerheads. So they just know. So if anyone can come back like with that story, like even though it's kind of a throwing spaghetti in a wall scene with stick, like you said, a cloud foam, it was more of the budget friendly side, I think. So it didn't have that cool look. But as long as they keep pushing Boost now, because that plus I guess Prime Knit is just like the magic combination for Adidas.
I mean, it kind of is. It kind of wasn't Kanye too, right? Because when the Ultra Boost came out, you had like the maybe 12 to 18 months of essentially like their OG colors, like you mentioned, the cream color was like probably 6th or 7th in the line. And towards the end of that first run, and then they introduced collaborations, and Adidas probably this is a bold statement, but Adidas does collaborations better than anybody, in my opinion. Like if you look back at like the A to ZX series from, whenever that was 2006 or 7, where they go through the whole alphabet and find partners that have that, letter at the front of their name to partner with, the Ultra Boost, the best thing that they did was not silo it into performance, right? They were like, okay, let's embrace that people are wearing this casually and lean into that. So then you had so many great, Hypebeast did a shoe, High Snobiety, partners that didn't normally do collabs, right? But then you had like the traditional ones, Woodwood, sneakers and stuff,
Soulbox with the uncaged one that blew everyone's mind.
Yeah, like there was just so many good ones that I think that's really an interesting piece to like how they approach that, these brands, I know we're getting a little long-winded, but these brands inherently keep things separate because it's easier to manage budgets and money and people in that way. But they're most successful when the brands are all crossed up. To Rohit's point, the mercurial stuff, like the Kobe stuff where he's able to go and kind of cross like, buildings on campus and get people excited. It's not just the product, right? It's the story. It's the being able to connect with people behind the scenes. It's all of those things. It's all those things that come into play that actually make shoes really successful. And we're kind of at this point too, where all the brands just kind of go and do the same things now. And like to your point, it's like they would put Travis Scott on it. Well, because, you know, the Wall Street numbers have to add up to X amount, and Travis Scott inherently equals a certain dollar amount every time you put his name on something, regardless of what it is. And I think that's really, in my opinion, we're just in that talking about that, you know, kind of pendulum swinging. We're just at that state where collaborations are, you know, they're never going away, but the dependency on a few, like, very, you know, tight range of collaborations, I think is something that we'll see kind of disappear, and we'll start to see people like getting really creative. And we do occasionally with some of the other brands where you're seeing, like, you know, skate brands do this incredibly well, right? It's like, oh, you have a shop in, you know, whatever small city in whatever small state. Cool. You get a you know, a New Balance collab. You get a, you know, Nike SB collab. Like, that's where, like, the creativity really kind of bubbles up from people that don't always get that. But when you go back to a Travis Scott, not to pick on Travis Scott, but this is like any collaborator, right? There's only so many things that these people are going to do with the same silhouettes before they get bored with it and are just like, let's just throw all black on it and throw my logos on it. Travis Scott, Jordan 1.
I think one last thing I will say, Nick, is to your point around collaborations. I think each one of the big two does something extremely well that the other one can only hope to accomplish. The thing is, and you've alluded to this, Adidas does a much better job collaborating with external partners. Nike does probably the best job in the world when they keep things in-house. So when you do like the Kyrie Mamba mentality, there's no equivalent to that in my mind from Adidas perspective that can generate that much hype, that can generate that much goodwill. But they rest their laurels on the fact that, hey, we're going to do this collab with Kanye, or we're going to do this. So I think that's the different yin and yang of it all. And I don't think one way is particularly right, one way is particularly wrong, because at the end of the day, everybody is just trying to get money because they need to flip their sneakers, whether it's on a corporate scale or whether it's on a out of the trunk sale.
Yeah. Yep. I think Adidas always has been more flexible with their partners. I mean, clearly you can argue that Travis Scott plays some of the most freedom with Nike, but other than him and Jay Lorenzo, who's now with Adidas, I think Adidas just has they're open to these ideas of, hey, we're gonna get a little crazy, and we know that people will like that. While Nike can cross-pollinate with each other, like you said, Mamba Mercurial, or, you know, Kobe and Mercurial, Kyrie, Kobe, so on and so forth, that it works better for them that way. I mean, that's why you get all these, like, the LeBron mixed with the Air Max 1 Safari. That worked. Like, they just have their different paths, and it just works for them, like, just like Rohit said.
The Vapor Tour, Jordan 3s.
The Kyrie Kyrgios collab.
Yeah.
Like, it's just things like that.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we can probably wrap on that, because I really think that that's, like, to your point, Rohit, that is like the two. It's like Nike's their success is their, you know, it's like the default at this point, right? Well, we know that we're going to do this the best, so we're going to keep it in house. We're going to find some other people across the campus, and we're going to do some cool shit together. And with Adidas, I feel like they've always lacked a little bit of confidence in that regard, but they've made up for it in the confidence in letting creative people go a little crazy, right?
Yeah. Yes,
and that
definitely
predates a lot of this conversation too. You know, like thinking of, like, you know, they gave Jeremy Scott an entire line of shoes without any thought or prayer that it was going to work, in my opinion. And it did. Like, that shoe, all the stuff that he did, you know, 2008, 9 or whatever, was absolutely bananas, and was ridiculed by guys like me, who then turned around and bought pairs multiple, you know, months later, where it was like, oh, that's a cool colorway, I want that one, you know, like, but, like, do I need wings on my shoes? No. Yes, I do. Like, that's why
I need those wings.
Like, that's why I love sneakers so much, is like people can do things and do it in creative ways where you think the most ridiculous things are then somehow cool and wearable, and, like, you just, like, I just love this stuff, and I'm so stoked to be able to talk to you guys about this, because this is a really great conversation.
Yeah, I said, you know, I talk about shoes all day. What you talking about? What did shoes and Taco Bell? Shoot.
We're gonna kill it in that 18 to 34 female demographic of this episode. I'm gonna feel it in my bone.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was a. As soon as Taco Bell's heard, it's like, oh, this is going to be a 99% male episode. Because I heard Taco Bell, we're out of here.
Ixnay the Ako Elbe. I don't even know. My take guidance what it needs to be. Anyway, Nick, take us home.
All right. Well, we appreciate all of you listening, watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. Make sure that you give us a review if you're on iTunes. Hit that follow button on Spotify. Tap that little star to give us a rating. You can also leave us a review on Amazon Music if you listen to us on Amazon Music. If you haven't done any of those things, I just got to ask, why not? You know, like
Just
we've
do
been cranking out the episodes. Just give us a little love. We would really appreciate it.
Anything is possible.
More importantly,
anyway, you can find me on Twitter at Rohisi. You can follow me on Instagram at RoadM13. Mike, where can they follow you?
You can find me here at Sneaker History. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MadWatcher789. Also find me on YouTube at Mike Guillory as well. Nick, tell them where you're at, bud.
You can find me at Nick Engvall on all the platforms. You can also find all of us at Sneaker History. Most importantly, hit the first link in the description to join the community. It's free. Discord. It's popping. We do some great things. There's incredible people in there. I love you all. Appreciate y'all. And we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
See ya.
Bezos!
Hey everyone, this is Nick again. Before you take off, do us a solid and head over to Apple Podcasts to leave us a review. Give us a rating on Spotify and Amazon Music, and make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel because we have even more video content coming soon. Speaking of new content, we have an amazing community of sneaker enthusiasts that hang out in our Sneaker History Discord on a daily basis. While sneakers is a connection point that brought us all together, we've all discovered countless shared passions that we have in common with each other. We recently launched a couple of new podcasts directly from our community. One of them is a Formula One podcast. If you're an F1 fan like me, the Exhaust Notes podcast is your weekly fix of Formula One fun. It's hosted by myself, Rohit Malhotra, and Todd Yates. New episodes drop every Tuesday. I've been wearing fitted hats for years and collecting my favorite teams since I was a little leaguer. It has been awesome to see so many new fans getting into fitteds in recent years. Crown and Stitch is our new talk show about fitted hats with Dexter, Keith, and myself, where we talk about fitted hats, snapbacks, throw in some obscure hats because we all kind of like some funky stuff once in a while, don't we? Copping, collecting, and so much more. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Hit the links in the show notes for this episode to give our new shows a listen, and be on the lookout for more new podcasts dropping soon. Last but not least, tell someone you like their kicks today. You never know how far a simple compliment can take you, and we all know how good it feels to have someone show their appreciation. Thank you all for the support, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.